Hi, everybody. I think we're live now, so thank you for joining us. I think we will wait a second before starting to be sure people are coming, but thank you again. Yeah, I think we can start now. So thank you again for joining us. We will be doing a webinar today on public data sources. I am myself Lina Merard. I am an ESG specialist at WeFin. I have been working within WeFin within the expertise team for years now, supporting financial actors and our clients on enhancing their ESG strategies and also working on data knowledge. And so, as I said, I will be moderating today's webinar on public data sources. Do not hesitate to ask your questions throughout the webinar within the chat. We will have a dedicated session at the end of the webinar to answer it. And I think our panelists today will be happy to answer any of your questions. So I've said it before, we are doing at WeFin a series of webinars dedicated to sustainable data sources and also with other data providers. And today we will focus on public data sources, which are freely accessible and official data set that do provide information on an entity, an insurer, environmental, social, and governance performance. So at WeFin, we've been working, for years with financial actors on the ESG strategies, and most of these actors are using more and more data sources in general, but we have noticed that they do use a lot of public sources lately. And when using one public sources, they usually use multiple. And we are a mission-driven company, so we are advocating for the use of these sources for multiple reasons that we will try to tackle today with our panelists. And in parallel, we have been working closely with the FIR, which is the French Sustainable Investment Forum, where public sources have also been promoted a lot to what we call pitches throughout the years. And together, we wanted to develop a tool that is called the mapping of public sources, where you have a list of all the sources that are used by our clients, by financial actors in general. And this mapping has been updated today. So, because we published it last year, and a lot of sources have changed their methodology or the databases. So do not hesitate to check the mapping. I think we will put it in the chat in a minute. So this mapping is really helping you to find sources that you could use for your different ESG strategies. We will see today that we have different purposes for public sources, engagement, you could have scoring, obviously, you could have also exclusion. We'll see that with our two great sources today, but they do also cover different thematics. So we will have deforestation, coal, but also social matters. And we do have also a coverage of different typologies of actors. You could have coverage of companies, or you could have also financial institutions or even countries. So to tackle the advantages of using public sources, also the data quality aspects of it, who's more suited than one financial actor? So we have today Anne-Claire from Sycomore, and we do also have two different data sources, such as Vault and Global Canopy, to help us with that. So I would love to introduce our speakers properly. So first, Anne-Claire, you are Head of Sustainability at Sycomore AM, and you're a member of the Executive Committee. You are also a board member of the French Sustainable Investment Forum, the FIR, I've said it before. Could you tell us a bit more about your role? What is your involvement with the FIR? What is the role of the FIR also when it comes to public sources? And do you use public sources on a daily basis at Sycomore?
Thank you very much, Lina, for this introduction, and very happy to be here in this webinar and share our experience. So yes, as Lina said, I am pleased to be head of ESG at Sycomore and also a board member of the French CIF. So within Sycomore, I, of course, manage the ESG analyst team. So our main role is to contribute to investment decisions as ESG specialists, is also to enhance the overall expertise of Sycomore on ESG. And as a member of the executive committee, I participate to elaborating our strategy, being a co-actor in France on SRI. Within the French CIF, so being a board member also give us some opportunity to contribute to the definition of the priorities of the French CIF. The role of the French CIF is really to promote sustainable finance, especially in France, but also to make sure that the French voice is also visible outside of France. Within Sycomore, we are particularly involved in the activities of the French CIF, mostly linked to stewardship and engagement. So we participate to a lot of collaborative engagement that are hosted by the French CIF. And within this engagement, we can also rely on public sources. The role of the French CIF is also to make sure we promote all the work that is done by various stakeholders on sustainable finance. So a specificity of the FIR is that we represent different type of stakeholders. So WIFIN is a member, for example, of the French CIF. So you have multiple stakeholders that are represented and that can act through the FIR to make sure the overall ecosystem helps driving sustainable finance. So that's why we organize also this kind of, the pitches that you mentioned earlier, also showing available public sources to all stakeholders. So when it comes to the use of public sources, I'm personally convinced that these public sources are key to make sustainable issues visible to all and accessible to all. So not only to investors, and we will dig on how we use them as investors, but also for all stakeholders. I think it's really a key role, and what we observe as a user of this data is that there is a high level of expertise within this organization that also help enhancing the overall knowledge of stakeholders about these key sustainability issues. So when it comes to Sycomore, in terms of philosophy, we've always been convinced that sharing what we are doing, sharing best practices is also a key leverage to sustainable finance. So that's why we try to make to be the more transparent as possible on our methodology. And also that's why in 2015 we started to develop a metric which is called the net environmental contribution. And we wanted to make this metric available to all. So the data are not public themselves, but the methodology is fully public. And I know the NEC initiative is a separate company that we've created, and we are a shareholder of the company. But today, the objective with the development of this methodology and make it visible and public was really to share how we see environmental impact and to give this access to this tool, which aims at driving investment towards environmental solutions.
Thank you so much, Anne-Claire. We do have also today with us Niels. So Niels, you are the head of oil and gas research at Ergovolt, which is a German NGO. So you've been working there for years, I believe. Could you tell us a bit of what it is, what's your role there, and also present the three data sets that we are seeing now?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here today. Yeah, so as you said, Urgewald is a German nonprofit of around 70 people who work on environment, climate, and human rights issues. And a couple of years back, we found that financial institutions had serious difficulties when it came to getting reliable data on the activities of the global coal industry. And this prevented them from analyzing the industry, from engaging with the industry, but it also prevented them from implementing impactful exclusions and from building greener products. We realized that many other data providers, they don't really offer forward-looking data, which is something that we found very important. So we decided to change the situation, and this led us to what we're doing now. And today, around 30 people work in the research department at Urgewald, and I lead this work on the data side. So that means I'm responsible for data quality and the introduction of new data points, among some other things. And now maybe on the three data sets that you've asked about. So you can already see those on screen. It's GCell, MCell, and Goggle. So two of those data sets are on the coal industry, and one large data set is on the global oil and gas industry. And so these data sets altogether have more than 300 individual financial institution users who use the data across more than 20 countries. And GCell covers the thermal coal value chain, while MCell looks at metallurgical coal, so coal that is used for steelmaking, while Goggle looks at the oil and gas value chain. And the data points that you can find in those data sets are quite different. So you can look stuff up like how much coal has been produced by a company, does a company plan new coal projects, how much revenue has been generated through coal-based activities, how much of a company's power portfolio is coal-based. So this type of stuff. And on the oil and gas side, it's rather similar, although of course the metrics differ. So you can look stuff up like how much oil and gas has been produced, how much of the oil and gas production is unconventional. So for example, through fracking or tar sands or Arctic production. And you can also look at, again, forward-looking metrics, so expansion metrics, to learn if a company intends to move new oil and gas resources into production, which is important if you want to contrast these operations with companies' climate transition strategies, for example. And we also have other data points like data on midstream expansion. Does a company build new pipelines, new LNG terminals, or new power stations even? And very new in the data sets is a dedicated column on the PAB thresholds that need to be implemented due to the ESMA fund name guidelines. Yeah, I'll stop here and save some for later.
Thank you so much, Niels. And last but not least, we have James with us today. You are an external consultant to Global Canopy, and you have been involved with them for a while now, I believe for more than 15 years. And you're working on one of the initiatives, which is called Forest IQ. So yeah, again, could you tell us a bit more about Global Canopy? What's your role there? And there are several initiatives that we can see right now on the screen. So how are they structured together?
Great, thank you. And yes, welcome to everybody. It's great to be on this call. Global Canopy is an NGO. It's a data-driven NGO. It was founded 25 years ago in Oxford, in the UK. And it's very much focused on tackling the flows of capital from both companies and investors that drive deforestation. So we provide open access data to drive transparency and accountability. And we work with lots of other NGOs as well to create products and initiatives. So we were a co-founder of the TNFD. We created Encore with UNEP FI and UNEP WCMC. So a lot of our products are really designed to help financial institutions to assess deforestation risk. My role in that, as you said, Lena, is on the Forest IQ tool in particular, though I was involved in Encore and many of the other programs there as well. My specific bit, there is a Forest IQ Pro version, which is, all of these are open source, but Forest IQ Pro is a commercial version. It's specifically designed for financial institutions, and it has licensed data like ISINs in there as well. So how are these all organized? So you've kind of got top down and then bottom up. So Encore is looking obviously at nature risks and opportunities from a top-down point of view. Then we have Trace, which looks at supply chains. So it links companies to supply chains in the commodities that drive deforestation. So you can work out where a company in Europe is sourcing their palm oil from or their soy by tracing it all down. And then we have a group of bottom-up tools which are looking at corporate performance. So we have Forest 500, which has been going for quite a long time now, which looks at the 500 companies globally that are most exposed to deforestation risks. So these are the major players, both upstream and downstream. We also include the 150 financial institutions that provide the most funding to those 500. We've recently launched a Brazilian version, the Floresta 250, because of the importance of Brazil, looking at the 250 most exposed companies there. Forest IQ looks at almost 3,000 companies. So it was designed to bring together all of the best-in-class NGO data sets. So it has Forest 500, Floresta 250, it has Trace, all from Global Canopy, but it also has ZSL spot data, it has CDP data, it has RSPO data, it has data from the Stockholm Environment Institute. So it brings everything together to make it easy for investors to do a scan of their portfolio at a company level, work out where the biggest risks are. We've got another one coming up called the Deforestation-Free Transition Pathway. That's essentially trying to replicate the Transition Pathway Initiative for climate, but to do it for deforestation. So we'll be looking at a sector-by-sector process, and that's really designed to help investors and banks with engagement, really holding their hands and taking them through what does a company need to do next to get to the higher level. And then finally, we have a Deforestation-Free Finance Initiative, which is a step-by-step guide for financial institutions to address their deforestation risk in their portfolio. So what tools can you use? What processes can you use? How can you do that? So I would strongly recommend that as a starting point for anybody. I'll pause for breath there.
Thank you so much again for joining us on this webinar. And again, for those who are watching, do not hesitate to ask your questions within the chat. We'll be happy to answer it by the end of the call. We can now jump in on the uses of public sources. I've said it before, you mentioned it also, many and more financial actors are using public sources, such as obviously yours, Govold and Forest IQ, for example. And we are now wondering how these sources really do answer financial actors' pain point. We've talked about transparency, we've talked about enhancing your ESG strategies. So I believe, Anne-Claire, could you tell us a bit more about, when supporting financial institution with the FIR or when working at Sycamore specifically, how do you think public sources are meeting such needs for, financial actors? Could you give us a bit of examples of how these public sources are helping?
Yes, sure. As you said, we use public sources in different ways. First, I mean, one of the challenges that we have as ESG specialists and within the financial sector is to make sure that we make investment decisions according to the promises that we do to our clients in the most objective way. So to do so, data are crucial, and the use of public data has also I mean, as enhanced in recent years, because I mean, actually we really find very good public data with, as I said previously, a high level of expertise and specialties, and also what is key in this data set and also in the governance of Global Canopy or for Urgewald, I mean, the fact that these institutions are independent also is the source of reliability and confidence, and also the fact that the entire methodology are very transparent. So for us, that's key points as investors. So then more specifically, and if I am very pragmatic how we use them, so I would say we have three main uses for these sources, and you already touched upon some of them, Lina. But first is, of course, within our ESG analysis. So how we enhance our analysis with incorporating these data. And one of the main challenges that we have is that is the coverage. So we need to cover huge investment universe sometimes, and so we try to automatize as much as possible our analysis, and doing so using data is as a key role. As for instance, last year we've worked on climate transition, so how to assess the transition plan of companies and how to automatize these assessments. And so we have built a model that use SBTi data, influence map data, CDP, TPI data. We also use, because we focus here on targets, results, and lobbying within this assessment. So all these sources, so some need some fees to have access to the entire database, but basically originally we can say it's public data, I think. The second use is exclusion. So here, of course, Urgewald is used by many investors today to implement our exclusion policy on fossil fuels. So the work that is done by Urgewald is really key for us to apply our policies and making sure that we rely on robust data here. And I mean, you've said, Niels, that you're 30 people and experts, and we know that companies do not sufficiently report on their expansion plans, etc. So deep research is necessary here, and that's the amazing job that Urgewald is doing. So the third areas of uses is engagement. So you said it, Lina, and I would quote Global Canopy work here, but also WBA, ChemScore. So we use all these sources that sometimes have limited coverage, but they are very useful anyway, because when we implement our engagement strategy, what we need is to be able to rely on the best practices. And so, for instance, when we look at the World Benchmarking Alliance, they are doing a great job at benchmarking on key topics. So again, there is a strong focus in terms of expertise here, and it helps us building our own expertise and our own view when doing our engagement actions.
Perfect. You did a great transition to Niels' work, because you've mentioned the list, that the exclusion list that you're using for fossil fuels, and you've a bit touched on that earlier, Niels, already. But could you tell us a bit more, how do you collect the data? And yeah, we said it before, actors are using it for exclusion matters, but yeah, do you have concrete example of how they're using it?
Yes, so the data gathering process is pretty cumbersome, and that's also why we have such a large team behind it. I mean, lots of the data, of course, comes from the companies themselves. So, of course, we use website resources, everything that's available. We use all the reports that a company might provide us with. So it might be annual reports, of course, or financial statements, but it also might be investor presentations, sustainability reporting documents, different kinds of standardized reporting formats that one might find on web pages in different countries. So we basically use all of what's available from the company itself, and then we add to this, and we add a lot to this, especially when it comes to screening for fossil fuel expansion. Because this information is not always readily available, and we even have lots of private players included in our data sets that don't have a website. But we still have some information on those companies, and this works because we screen for fossil fuel projects globally. So we look at we look at publications of industry associations, for example. We look at publications from energy regulators in different countries to make sure that we know which projects are in a permitting process, which projects might have already been permitted, and then we follow up to make sure we know which company will effectively carry out a project. And if we find enough information, we are able to ascribe a certain project to a certain company, or of course various companies if more than one is involved. So this is roughly how it works. And we also rely on data on one other third-party data provider, which is Rystad Energy, which is extremely useful for the analysis of upstream oil and gas. So this is how we're able to be very, very precise when it comes to the upstream metrics, like fracking percentages and those kind of things. The second question was how actors use the databases. So a couple of use cases have already been mentioned, right? Exclusions, for example, for especially green products, or also corporate exclusion policies that an institution might have. Engagement has been mentioned. Other use cases include labeling schemes. For example, the Belgian Towards Sustainability label relies on our data sets as official watch lists in order to implement its fossil fuel criteria. Also, I'm happy to say that our data becomes more and more important on the passive side, so for index construction. This is also a very interesting use case. Also happy to mention that the new SFDR review, let's see how it turns out, but the new SFDR review includes expansion exclusions, very interesting ones, that could very easily be implemented using our data. So I think it's going to gain some more importance on that side as well. This is, I think, a good overview of how financial institutions are using it.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. We've mentioned oil and gas, coal. You did mention also transition, Anne-Claire. There's also a hot topic that we're hearing a lot every day, which is nature-related topics. And you've mentioned, I think, TNFD, GEMS, and now the ISSB thinking of developing a dedicated norms in this dimension of nature-related risk and opportunities. And on a more specific topic, which is deforestation, do you feel like, James, such sources as yours are essential for financial actors? And same way, could you tell us a bit more about how do you collect the data, the team involved, and how can we use it? You've mentioned it a bit before also, and Anne-Claire said that you could use it for engagement purposes. So do you have examples of such purposes?
Yeah, lots of questions. Yeah, I mean, I think people are starting to realize that looking at climate and nature separately is not necessarily very helpful. I mean, there are certainly issues like water that are right in the middle of both of them. I mean, in terms of deforestation, it's about 10 to 12% of global emissions. So you can't really be thinking about net zero and transitions without thinking about deforestation. It's more emissions from deforestation than from the entire world's land transport. So it's not going away. It's something that people need to address. in terms of our data sets, there really isn't very much else available in the marketplace, especially open source. Forest IQ was designed to fix a lot of problems that financial institutions had. So there was a group of different NGOs all producing different bits of information on companies. So ZSL produced some, we produced some, CDP produced some. They're all in different formats. They all get updated randomly, and then when you update them, you change all of the column headings. So every time you have to try and integrate it into your own internal ESG system, it's a nightmare. There's no consistency between them. So we actually worked with a working group of banks and investors to really think about what do you actually need? How can we create that? So that's why we brought together all of these different data sets, put them all in one. We put it in a completely consistent format. It's for most people, it's just a CSV file. It's very consistent. We update it several times a year. And as I said, the pay for one has got things like ISINs, which make it much, much easier to work out which company everybody's talking about. We're also looking at about 3,000 companies. I mean, we are, whilst that's not the entire universe, it's probably most of the relevant universe for deforestation risks, which obviously don't affect every single company on Earth in a material way. And we collect that data. It's all publicly available. So we either take it directly from companies, from their websites, from CDP, or from third parties such as ZSL, Spot, RSPO. The trace data comes from trade data from around the world. And then we add in our own analysis on top of that of how good a company's policies are and how effective we think they are at implementing them. And then in terms of how people use the different databases, again, we've got those kind of top-down ones, so things like Encore and actually Forest IQ are generally used for screening a portfolio. So you can look at the whole portfolio and start to think about where are my key risks, both in terms of sector and geography. Forest IQ will take that right down to a company level as well. So where are my top 10 risks, for example, top 20 risks? Where are my geographic risks? Financial institutions, so a lot of them use that. Storebrand publishes a great report every year on how they use Forest IQ to analyze their portfolio and look at those risks. So people are screening for TNFD, they're screening for the French biodiversity regulations, they're screening for CDP disclosure. We're also seeing interest from drivers such as the SBTI net zero standard. So for FIs, that you have to start looking at deforestation because of the emissions. So you have to analyze your portfolio and then create an engagement strategy. So all of our tools will help you do that. And also we're seeing things like exclusion lists. You know, how can we take the worst performing companies on deforestation and exclude those as part of our overall ESG policy? And then, of course, in September, we're planning on launching this deforestation-free transition pathway. Investors are engaging with Forest 500 and Forest IQ data, but again, this is more about really hand-holding them on a company-by-company basis and making it easy for them to go into a meeting with some very clear asks from companies.
Thank you. So yeah, Niels and James, you've both mentioned the collection of data, and Claire, you said it, public data sources, they do offer a high level of methodological transparency, and sometimes when reading about, the reports that you put together, we can see sometimes the calculation formulas, normalization formulas, so it really goes higher in terms of transparency. And it's interesting right now in the context of new transparency requirements asked from for ESG rating providers in the UK, in the European Union, a new regulation on that. So public sources for us really do stand out in that matter. So in this context of transparency, how do you, Niels, maybe you could start with that, ensure that your reports are very transparent? I think already telling us more about collecting data is already something very transparent, but how do you ensure that it's very transparent for financial actors in general, but also for the broader society?
Yeah, so when it comes to collecting data, firstly, we have to be accountable internally as well. So when we collect a data point, there's always going to be a timestamp as well as a stamp that tells us which person of the team has researched something. So that's the first step. So we have this accountability internally, and we can also check and compare data points to previous years in order to see if there's huge deviations, and if so, we need to look into that in order to maintain consistency. Yeah, and in order to document this, this way of data gathering, way of putting together data to the outside world, we have methodology documents being included in the data sets themselves. So when you download them, you'll find detailed methodology descriptions for every single data point that is being provided. And we see this becoming more and more important also when thinking about use cases like the index design use case I mentioned, because that's quite heavily regulated, this field. So also in this field, you need to be very precise about describing what you're doing when you deliver a certain metric. So we're still improving on that, but I feel we're already we're already displaying quite some transparency. And the good thing about really working with our data is also that you can always contact us. So in case something like a teeny tiny detail is not included in the methodology, we're always there and reachable. So you can shoot us an email and we'll basically explain every single data point, providing sources and everything connected. So I hope this helps also increasing confidence in what we provide.
Perfect. And what about you, James? How do you ensure transparency within the reports?
Yeah, as Neil said, I mean, this is all about building up trust, isn't it, in our products? I mean, we are mission driven, so it is our intention to get as many people using our data as possible, whether that's governments or financial institutions or companies, and trusting in it and understanding what we're saying. So yeah, we have the methodology for Forest IQ, for Forest 500, for anything that has a methodology is up there on our website. It's completely public. And like Borgovad, you can go into our data set, you can see where the data point has come from, the very specific link there. Here's where that piece of data is coming from, and here's therefore how it fits into our methodology. So it's completely transparent. And we also, with Forest 500, we give companies an opportunity to we give them an opportunity to come back and say, you've missed something, we think that's wrong. Here's a piece of data that perhaps you've missed. So again, we want this to be as robust as possible. I mean, obviously, if you're an investor and you rock up to a company and you say, here's what Forest 500 says, and the company says, well, it's completely wrong, nobody looks good from that. So it's really important for us to be as open as possible. And also it helps us because people will say that piece of data is out of date or it's wrong. And that's great for us because, there will be incorrect data in there. We're covering 3,000 companies and a whole bunch of data points. We're not too proud to say that some of it will be wrong. And if you're open about it, it really helps because people will point stuff out to you and you can change it really quickly. And it helps keep the data set as robust as possible.
Thank you. You all mentioned data quality in different, moments of this webinar, and we're hearing this word every day at Within. So data quality is the main thing we are working on today. And Claire, you're working in a financial institution, but also supporting other financial institutions throughout the FIR, the French CIF. So how do you feel like stakeholders or financial actors in general are approaching the challenge of data quality? We can say that it still is a major issue for all of them. And could you tell us a bit of example of still having troubles accessing sometimes databases? For example, you have problems with the format or how to process it, and especially with public sources, is that still an issue?
Yes, I mean, we have many challenges when it comes to data. So as I said, I mean, the main use of the data for us is first to, I would say, pre-screen our investment universe. Sometimes when it's really specific data, we will use it at the contrary for engagement action with a very specific purpose. But the first purpose is really to be able with data to screen our investment universe. And we are well aware that there are a lot of challenges when it comes to data quality. And that's why in our processes, we always enable an override by the analyst to make sure that if we have a more recent data, we can put it in. If we have some dialogue with a company, and the company also give us all the argument to show us what is the correct data, and we can trust them on that, then we do have this possibility to override, I would say, the old data sources that we use at first. So when it comes to data integration in our systems, so of course we have also some challenges, and we do need some database that would be quite homogeneous in time, and indeed it's not always the case. So for some data sources we may intervene first within my team to make sure that we acknowledge how the database is this year and how we can incorporate it in our system. And then, of course, we need ID key for companies. So the ISIN number, for instance, sometimes in some public sources is not always available. But I mean, I think we also need to acknowledge that at some point, if we want coverage, data quality, automation purposes, I think Forest IQ has built, as I understand, has built the business case here that at some point, if we use it for our business purposes as financial institution, it can be understandable that we need to pay for it at some point. So I think there is also a complementary role here of all these institutions that make this public data available. So at first, you have access to specific data when you are a given stakeholders, and you need to have access to some data. But at some point, if you want to really streamline this integration of this data, I think we all need to have strong tools to do so, and this costs. That's and I think it's a service that we need to pay for. So yeah, in terms of data quality, I mean, we also pay in complementary to those public sources, we also pay for a private data provider, and they are also struggling with data quality. So and they are less specialist because they are covering all kind of ESG data. So their main added value there is really to be able to gather the most efficiently as possible a quantity of data points, and to make sure the data is quite homogeneous from a company to another. But yeah, they're also struggling, even though we are paying them a lot. So and so that's gonna remain a challenge, but then it's also our responsibility as investors. So our role also is, I mean, we've not worked on that within the FIR, but maybe that could be an idea to make sure that we have also good practices in terms of data check. So we could share our practices, but it's our responsibility to make data control and to implement that in our own processes.
Yeah, so there's still lots of pain points, and it's not only related to public sources, but also private ones, obviously. So you've mentioned data freshness, you've mentioned also coverage issues, and you did say that you're updating, I think, James, your database on a regular basis. Could you tell us a bit more about the measures that you've put in place to ensure the quality of the data? Could be, as you said, and you mentioned it, the teams involved, or could you tell us a bit more about that, the measures you've put in place lately?
Yeah, sure. So it's very much evolving. I mean, Forest IQ is about just over 2 years old now, and it's changed a huge amount. I would say our data is much more robust. I mean, partly we've put more resources behind it, partly because we've gone public with it and we've had a huge amount of feedback. You know, we know which bits we have to do better, and we've done those better. So there's a lot of information out there actually on deforestation. Some of it is critical and we have to have it. So does a company have a publicly available policy on deforestation is a pretty critical data point, but it's also there. Either they do or they don't. So we can go and we can check. It gets a little bit trickier when you're looking at something like how exposed is a company to deforestation. So for that, you need the volumes that they have in specific commodities. For some companies, that data is there. For some companies, we can estimate it, and I'm not too worried about the estimates because I think we'll be roughly right. If you're an upstream player, you're all about palm oil. Generally, we know how much palm oil you're producing. We know how many hectares you have. We know all of that information. If you're a downstream supermarket, that data is really quite difficult, but we have a very good idea of roughly how exposed a supermarket is to each of these commodities. So we're not going to get that hugely wrong. But we're always trying to kind of improve that and get new data sets and better data sets. We're just about to change one of our metrics completely because we haven't had enough source data. And so we're going to a different source. We're going to use NACE data to try and get better revenue data for companies. So that's going to be a change over the next few months. We update the data as often as we can. We've actually updated Forest IQ 4 times this year as we've had new data coming in. There is obviously a time lag. There's not much we can do about that. There's a time lag between companies' actions and companies reporting, and then there's another one between companies reporting and us analyzing it and updating it. However, for things like, you know, how much soy do you produce, that's not massively changing on a day-to-day basis. Policies aren't changing on a day-to-day basis. So I think we've got the timings about right. We had a query, interestingly, recently about a data point that was in our analysis from 2023. And clearly there have been newer data points. And we had a look at it, and actually it was the best data point that we had. So there were newer ones, but they didn't add anything. So we still have the 2023 bit in there because that's where they talked about their policy or whatever it is. So even if you haven't got the latest data in there, you may still have the best data in there. And I think that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, perfect. So Niels, we know that you're giving financial actors some enriched list, like exclusion list, where we can find ISIN codes. You mentioned it, Anne-Claire. It's very important to have that. Do you feel like it's essential for financial actors to have this identification? Could you tell us a bit more about why you've started doing that for financial actors?
Yeah, we've been doing it for quite a while now. James has also said that they're doing it as well, right? So yes, it's essential because if you don't deliver some kind of identifier like an LEI or an ISIN code, what is going to happen is that people are going to do a name matching exercise of some sort, so some fuzzy matching. And while you can do that, it's very much prone to mistakes, and it will always still include lots of manual labor. And yeah, because of being so error prone, I think yeah, a lot of financial institutions are rightfully reluctant to do this manually. I think there's always some stuff that you need to carry out manually at the end of the day, but you don't want to go. I mean, James has mentioned it as well. We also provide information on more than 3,000 entities. You don't want to match those by hand. So what facilitates the process is if you deliver an entity identifier of some sort, or of course a security identifier, like an ISIN code. And I think I mean, usually you need, as a data provider, you need access to some sort of a database in order to be able to enrich your own data with this identifier data. And this takes time, but it also takes money. In case of ISIN codes, for example, there's licensing that you need to be aware of. So I think this is the reason why it can be difficult for smaller organizations or initiatives to enrich their data with this type of information. But yeah, I would say it's very much needed in order to be able to work quickly and reliably with the data that we deliver and the data that others deliver as well.
Yeah, you're right. And it's also essential because when you want to use multiple data sources, you want to be able to match it directly. And it's a subject, like, we're always talking about that. Also, we've been in financial actors are struggling a lot with that. On that topic of like putting together public and private sources, we tend to sometimes compare it and saying, okay, there's pros and cons of using private sources, but there's also pros and cons of using public sources. But I do believe that in practice, and you've mentioned it also, Anne-Claire, most financial actors, they do use it in sync. They don't use it very like in different use cases. So do you, Anne-Claire, for example, have some concrete like use cases where you did use a private sources and compile it with a public one, or the other way around?
Yes, sure. I mean, within our ESG model, what we've been working on in the past years is to automatize some of the calculation of the score. And to do so, we've screened several data providers, and at the end, we've come up with a model that is using raw data. So we are not using external scores. We only use the raw indicators. So when using raw indicators, then it's easier probably to implement it with various sources. So what we're trying to do, I mean, of course, operationally, it's always easier for all the team involved to rely on one main provider, having all the cable connected with one given provider. But at the end of the day, we are also complementing this data in any case. So when we complement with especially the public sources, it's often to deep dive on a specific topic. So I was talking about our climate transition flag. So here we're using various sources, and I mean, at the moment we are very basic. Like we have a huge data set in a huge Excel file. So it's not it's quite manual at the moment, but we plan also to automatize and make this process more and more reliable and automatic. As Neil said, I mean, the issue here is to make sure the analysts have time to do their job on having opinion on ESG cases and investment cases, and that's where they have added value. So I really want them to have most of their time on building their opinions, deep diving in a specific material topic for a company, and not collecting all the ESG data points that we need for our overall ESG score. So that's the way we use multiple sources, basically.
Thank you so much. I think we had great conversations and insightful comments. And we were lucky to have today the two perspectives from one, financial actors working with public sources and two very great public sources. So yeah, again, do not hesitate to use our mapping of public sources. It will give you a bit of info on how to extract data, where to find it, how to, use the methodologies. So yeah, again, do not hesitate to use it. I think we have maybe 5 minutes left if anyone wants to ask any question. I don't think we have some yet, but we can wait a minute, and then if not, we'll end up this webinar. Yeah, I think we don't have any, but again, do not hesitate to send us any comments, infos or questions. Oh, maybe we do. I have a last one. Yeah. Okay. Okay, what modification were made in the panorama? So you've heard it. Niels and James told us a bit about the updates that they've done on several sources and databases. The modifications are all about it. Many sources have just changed in terms of methodology or in terms of just the data that you can access to. So many links have changed, many methodological case have changed. So it's all about having it properly and use it properly. And we will add during this year, so 2026, the public sources that we've worked on lately. So yeah, you should keep a bit posted about the news on our mapping, because there's going to be lots of more sources. So yeah, I think it's a great way of ending today's webinar. Thank you so much again, Anne-Claire, Niels, and James, and to the audience today. It has been amazing to have you. And yeah, do not hesitate to come back to us if anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.